Bo and Luke Nation, welcome to another episode of the Bo and Luke Show. I'm your co-host, Luke Carignan.
I'm your other co-host, Bo Bravo. And folks, today we are talking about foster care. We're talking about abuse during foster care. We're talking about joining the U.S. Army. We're talking about, what else are we talking about, Luke? I just lost my train of thought. You're going to have to bleep that out of there.
Yeah,
or maybe not. Who knows? No, we are talking about substance abuse. We're talking about a guy coming back from all of those things with his own podcast called Real Talk with Roman, about his relationship with his wife and his kid and all that he's doing to overcome all of those childhood and early adult traumas. Amazing, amazing podcast.
Can't wait for you guys to hear him. But before we get into that, go check us out at theboandlukeshow.com. If you like what we're saying, give us a review. We really take those to heart. So if there's any way that we can improve, write about that too. Or if you're loving us, just go ahead and give us 5 stars. You know, we wouldn't ask unless it really helped us out. And, you know, also go online on our website. I believe you can get your own signed copy of your book. Is that correct, Bo?
Yeah, you can. You can on the website, theboandlukeshow.com, click buy the book, take you to the page. You put in the amount and you order the book. Come right. We'll get the message. And I will send you a personal signed copy of my book just for you. And hey, we made it as easy as possible. Podcasts are published on many platforms. So on the website, we just kind of direct everybody there. Top right corner, you see 2 big red buttons. One says YouTube, one says Apple Podcasts. So if you hit YouTube and you watch on YouTube, or you're one of those people that likes to watch on that platform, we just ask that you please subscribe. That way we will you'll get all the information on when new episodes are posted.
Beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. All right. Without further ado, here is Roman.
So Roman, you're here with us today, the Bo and Luke studio. Let's start off. Just tell us about yourself. Start with where you grew up, and we'll just go from there. We're gonna get real. We're gonna get raw, and we're gonna let you lead the way, and then we'll ping you with questions.
Man, I love it. Real talk's my game, so let's do this. So for me, I grew up in Texas my whole life. I grew up in foster care, so I bounced around Texas a lot as well. But I was at the foster home in Stephenville till I was about 9 years old, almost 10. And then I moved over to a little town called Fairfield. From there, I stayed there till I turned 18 and joined the Army because they said they'd show me the world. Went to Oklahoma first, then to Arizona, then to Iraq and Afghanistan. I felt like the world was very small and very deserty.
Yeah. We can talk about that for sure. So
now I live in San Antonio.
And now you're in San Antonio. Is that where you grew up in Texas? You said you grew up in Texas.
Yeah, so I grew up in Dallas or near Dallas, Fairfield. But San Antonio was where I was stationed, and it's where I said I lived but never spent any time. So when I got out, married a woman from here in San Antonio and started trying to see what San Antonio had to offer.
So, hey, Luke, I would love to talk to Roman for just a little bit about foster care. I was a foster parent for a while I was still in the Army. So how, if you don't mind sharing, Roman, how did you end up in foster care?
Yeah, so I do not mind sharing at all. I started in foster care because my mother gave me up. She gave up me and my sister and a couple other siblings, various ages. And funny story, me and my sister actually reconnected a little less than a year ago, and she is married to a Cav Scout out of Fort Hood. So small world.
So you got split up as kids, different homes.
We got split at birth. So I was in the system in the late 80s, right? So it was kind of a different system than it is now. Family integration wasn't the goal. Getting you somewhere was the goal.
Yeah.
And so that difference made it to where if there was a family that wanted a baby girl, they got her and I got put somewhere else. And that's not to discredit her journey or mine. But yeah, that was just the way the system was. And since then, it's kind of changed to try to keep siblings together. And I don't necessarily disagree with that change. I think it's a good idea.
So coming up through the foster system, bad experience, good experience, okay experience, indifferent?
I like to say it was less than ideal. I grew up in a lot of different homes. Some were abusive. Some were great, right? Some were the place you wish you could be. And I think for me, that led to some of the traumas that affected me later on in my life as I grew up. Yeah, I mean, it was a mix, and I don't discredit the experience. I love it. It's my story. It allows me to tell people now your hustle's bigger than your struggle because I went through it.
Yeah, no, we talked a lot about that with one of our guests, Marcus Ogden. And when you have the struggle, you make it through. It's your story, it's your life, it's your experience. And it's hard to help other people through struggles if you've never struggled.
Exactly.
Right? You know, you have that experience in your background. So how many different homes?
Oh man, I really truthfully lost count, but
No kidding.
Between that time, I mean, I was bounced all over Texas. When I went to speak at the foster home I grew up at, my caseworker, she was there as well, and we met again for the first time in years. And one of the stories I told was I remember her getting a speeding ticket because she was driving me in the middle of the night across Texas from one home to another home. So, I mean, it was pretty much the gamut.
Yeah, it is sad. My experience when the first two kids showed up at my home, the social worker brought them. It was a brother and sister, 3 and 4 years old. They each had a black trash bag, and that was their stuff, their clothes, no toys, nothing. And it was just super. Oh, it broke my heart, man.
Yeah, people are like, "How are you such a minimalist?" I'm like, I've always been a minimalist. Like I've always been used to throwing things in a bag and going, whether it was in the military or in foster care. Like that was my identity, that I had no identity, that I was just this bag of stuff that traveled place to place.
Wow. Yeah, that's even hearing that, it rips me apart because I was in it for what people are in it for today. You're trying to get kids into homes, not just place them somewhere, but to actually put them in a family. So hearing those stories, it's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough.
And to that, man, like it's May, it's Foster Care Awareness Month right now. And also, like, I remember being very rude to a lot of house parents that I had and people that, you're not my parent. Don't tell me what to do. I hate you. You can't even be a mom. That's why you're trying to be mine. Like I've run the gamut of things that I've said. Right.
Yeah. I imagine.
But it's a big props, really and truly. Like, thank you for what you did, and to all the foster parents out there, if you're listening, like that's a hard thing to do. And knowing the kind of person that I am and the kind of person that I was as I went through the system, I just commend those people, because that's a level of just compassion that I don't think everyone fully understands. They go, "Oh, that's so nice that you do that," but there's a lot of sadness and a lot of other emotions that come through as you're doing that.
Yeah, it's unreal, man. We were in it. I was in it and the foster to adopt. So the goal at the time was to adopt, and that was the reason why I had the first brother and sister, because they had been in foster care for a while, and they were only 3 and 4 years old, a little while, and they were actually. I mean, real quick, they were the children of a Navy sailor who lived outside of a Navy base, and they were abused. Daycare was locking them in their bedroom, and then dad went to his base assignment. Mom went to work, and the little boy at 2 years old still didn't know how to walk because he was in a crib all day in his own urine and feces and everything else. And then they came into the house and they were pretty sure, the social worker was like, we've only got like one more court hearing with the parents, and we truly feel parental rights are going to be stripped away, and then they'll be up for adoption because they haven't been doing what they should be doing. And the case was just so egregious in how those children were treated. And then it was like 6 weeks in, they had their court date, and the judge gave them back to the parents. And their social worker came back up and picked them up and put them in the van and never saw them again. I think I dismissed myself from my family, and I went in the bedroom and I cried. I'm like, broke my heart. God bless you, man, for making it through and being where you are today.
Man, thank you so much. Bless you for what you did.
Oh, it's nothing, man. It's my story, right? So take us after foster care. You went straight into the Army?
Yeah, foster care took me straight into the Army. I took the ASVAB, scored pretty high, and they said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Yeah, I don't know, something fun where I can see the world." They were like, well, how about being an interrogator? And, oh, we'll give you some extra money too. And it's like, I like money. And so I signed up, and I was off in Oklahoma going through basic, and then went to AIT in Arizona and started training up and gearing up to go to Iraq. So that was, so I joined in 2007. I was on a plane to my first deployment in early 09.
Gotcha. So military intelligence, Fort Huachuca, right?
Mm-hmm.
Interrogator. So that's during the Iraq time. I mean, all I can think about during those time frames, was it Abu Ghraib, waterboarding,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
were big topics of discussion.
Yeah.
So come on, you're going to have to share some stories.
So that's the thing, right? Like everyone's
Don't give away any national secrets, but do it.
Way to jump right in, Bo.
Yeah. Do what you can.
Yeah, man. So that's the thing. Everyone's first thought is when you say you're an interrogator, right? One of two things. They're like, ooh, he knows every lie I tell, or, oh my gosh, you waterboarded people, right? Like those are the two spectrums. Like I can't say anything around this person, or they're going to like beat me in my sleep. And it's not as harsh as that, to be perfectly honest. It's like this. It's a conversation, right? You're talking to a person to try to achieve an outcome, the same way as on a podcast, you're talking to a person to achieve the outcome of helping the guest. The only difference is my outcome was to try to find out where bombs were, or where bad people were, or weapons, or whatever, right? Insert whatever it was. And the thing that people always laugh at is I say one of my best sources, Yetani's the person who gave me the best information. I gave him a cheeseburger, and we just talked about like his life. You know, I just gave him a platform to kind of talk and build that rapport. And then he was like, hey, you know, you want to know this? You want to know that? And so I was like, yeah, sure. You know, and I'm just listening and letting him do his thing. And he was like, I like to draw. And I was like, here's some paper. Why don't you draw? You know? And so then he was like, hey, I'm going to draw a bad guy for you. And I'm like, that's perfect. I would love that. So he drew it, and then I showed it to people, and they're like, wow, this is actually really good. Looks just like his target photo. And, oh, is this like a map of where he lives? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, cool, we're going. So it was just real straightforward. And for me, it was easy. I kind of attribute it to foster care, right? I was a chameleon, and I was able to kind of avoid people and kind of keep them at distance and not really build those emotional ties. So I was able to go into rooms with these people and talk to them, and, you know, let them get really deep and raw about what was going on. Not knowing that at 19 years old, like this is horrible for your internal, like mental health, to just kind of compartmentalize emotions and kind of objectify people. That's actually really bad. That didn't register for me at 19. But so doing that a couple of times, Iraq, Afghanistan a few times, working with special operations for 2 years straight, like it was a huge tax on that. But yeah, I mean, it was various different kinds of, you know, just communication. Like obviously there were some shock and awe kind of moments when you first roll off of things. And then there were, you know, long-term conversations where you would sit with a person time after time, you know, inside of a cafe or inside of a detention facility, and you would talk to them. And so I always like to say it's not always what the movies say, right? Like,
oh, sure.
Jason Bourne never had to write a report, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure you wrote many.
Yes.
But he could kill people with the pencil, though, to write the report with.
You don't have to write the report when you can do that.
That's right.
Now, did you go through language school? Did you learn Arabic? Did you speak the language? Did you have an interpreter? How did that work?
So I had an interpreter, and, you know, you kind of pick up a little bit of language along the way. But no, I had an interpreter, built some great relationships with, you know, local national interpreters, DLI trained interpreters. And so it was always interesting because when I started working in different businesses, people would say, you know, we're talking through an interpreter. Don't look at the interpreter and talk to the interpreter, talk directly to the person. And I'm like, yeah, no problem, man. Like I've done this for years. So you just kind of, eventually you forget that an interpreter's there when you're having those conversations. Yeah. And so, but yeah, it was really cool to work with them and see those different cultures and kind of their view on what lying and, you know, deception was, because not all of them are trained in psychological factors and things of that nature, but they just were so in it. Like that culture was what they were born into. So you learn things over time, right? And so it was an interesting on the ground lesson from someone who And usually those interpreters had been speaking for U.S. troops since the beginning of the war, right? So,
Yeah.
so their knowledge and their background, yeah. So it was huge. So it was essentially like having another teacher there beside you in the room who could say, "Hey, this is, I kind of noticed this." And while they weren't certified interrogators or anything of that nature, they had just been in the room so many times that you just learn it over time. So.
Yeah, for sure. I bet. What an experience. Did you ever get a feeling whether you're interrogating them, you're trying to get results because you have your mission that you need to accomplish and you're trying to get information. Did you ever feel like as I'm almost like you're building relationships with these people in order to get what you need. Did you ever feel like they thought you were building a genuine relationship with them, or like
Yes.
I mean,
and that is probably one of the, at a certain point, that's kind of what not really broke me, but changed my perspective on it, because I would have these conversations with people and essentially I would walk away from it and, they would spill their guts out. I'm not going to see my kid get married. I'm never going to see my child again. Or, I'm so scared, or insert whatever, right? This deep, like emotional story, whether it was fear based, love based, whatever. And I would hear it and then I'd listen to them, act empathetic, do all these okay. Yeah. Oh yeah. And then I'd walk away and I'd just be like, all right, cool. Like, what's for dinner? Like it just didn't even, it stopped phasing me that humans were experiencing emotions. And to me, that was kind of scary now that I look back on it. But at that age, you were told compartmentalize it and you did it. And that's not to say that it's bad or that that's the same experience for everyone else. But I had the past trauma of coming through foster care where I already had built that lack of human connection. And now I was in a job where every day was just kind of go manipulate a person or let a person see a side of you that may or not be true. And so all of those pieces, even though all your stories and your rapport, it was all built on some level of truth, there was some level of separation from you, right? So it just kind of, it built this deeper chasm between me and emotions. And it was rough.
Yeah, I bet. I could only imagine because you're in it like all the time, and you have a very specific mission to get accomplished. I know for me, it was I was in Iraq in 2004 and dealt with a lot of local nationals. Coming onto the base, we'd get all, and at that time if we wanted ink for the printer, I got it through a local Iraqi businessman who came on base. We had folks building stuff for us, and they were local Iraqi carpenters. And we had an interpreter, and you start building, or you think you're building relationships with them, right? But then, and it feels very genuine. But then you always have the sliver in the back of your mind that's like, but is it real for them, or are they just scared and they're trying to just get by and get through this? Right. So they're just playing a role, if you will. It was, interesting times, interesting experience. Well, thank you for your service. Thank you.
My pleasure, man.
Very much. And when did you, 4 years, 5 years, when did you separate?
So I did 6 years and immediately ended. So 6 years I got out. And right as I got out, a guy was calling me that was a friend of mine. He had deployed. He was with group. And he said, hey, man, I'm going to Afghanistan and I need a guy to do some counter intel work and I don't have somebody. You interested? And I said, yeah, sure. And so for the next 2 years, I was in Helmand Province working with MARSOC and a couple other groups, just doing counter intel work, base security, screenings, intelligence consulting, all of that thing. So the whole security gamut.
Got it. But as a contractor. Very cool. Yeah.
It was
excellent.
Fun.
I bet that was definitely. Did it feel different? Being in a war zone as a contractor versus a soldier?
So much different. And it's actually kind of the inspiration. Oh man, I'm going to drop it here first. It's kind of the inspiration behind me doing, I have this book idea that I've kind of been drafting and it's coming to life on my computer, Learning to Lead from the Shadows, Lessons in Leadership from a Former Army Interrogator. Because a lot of the times you get to watch these amazing leaders doing things. And over that 2-year stint, I watched multiple special operations teams come in with different leaders and different leadership styles. And you got to see these leaders and you were always kind of in the background, right? Because you're the intel guy, the contractor. So no matter whether I was active duty or a contractor, I was always in the room, but I wasn't always at the front of the conversation. And
Right.
so just getting to watch all these leaders do things, I mean, it was so powerful from the level of discipline that it was inside of taking a gun apart to just how dedicated and passionate they were about their workouts or about hanging out together and having personal time, right? Like just the level of intensity that they took to everything was
Yeah.
just it was inspiring.
Oh, that's a great experience. So then contractor that ends in Afghanistan, back to San Antonio.
Back to San Antonio, and this is where it kind of gets rough in my story, right? Because I haven't dealt with my foster care trauma. I haven't dealt with multiple deployments. I haven't dealt with any of that trauma. I haven't even fully transitioned, right? I'm still in this mindset of I'm this amazing interrogator who helped special operations, who saved your life. You should be giving me a job and thanking me, like this huge chip on my shoulder, this crazy ego, and this no clue what's going on in the world, right? And think that college is irrelevant and all these different things. And so it was a huge wake-up call for me going into places and being told no, trying to figure out what I was going to do. I kind of slipped into a little bout of depression. I had some knee pain and some old injuries that kind of acted up. So I started taking pain pills and drinking a lot and things of that nature. So it was unhealthy, and not to perpetuate that stereotype, but really and truly, it was just me not dealing with my personal traumas. And so then I started to see a little success. I got a job. I kind of started transitioning, figuring it out, but not really figuring out, just letting my talent kind of take me there and my work ethic, but not really dealing with any of those problems. So it got to a place where I felt the walls caving in on me as we bought a house. I stepped out of my marriage. I was done with everything. Got to a bottom of the pit kind of thing where I was in an apartment, being threatened, and had a gun in my mouth and a bottle beside me. Right? So I mean, took it all the way down, right? And so I kind of pulled myself up from that and said, you know what, I want my marriage, I want my life, I want all of this. And so I went down the hard path of getting it back, right? So I started going to therapy. I started kind of speaking to people about what was going on, started trying to rebuild my marriage, rebuild that trust, and do all of that. So, I mean, it was a massive journey with a lot of things that went into it. And it's still a process. It's kind of like a fire, right? It can burn out of control, or it can be a tool depending on how you're regulating it, how you're stoking it, how you're controlling it.
Well, brother, I am incredibly grateful that you are here with us today, and that it did not get the better of you, and that you're sitting here and you're doing great things today. I think it's one of those things, Luke, especially it's tough for me with all the coronavirus and the COVID talk, and everybody's so scared about dying, and we can't spread this disease because people will die. And some days it pisses me off because 22, it's the number 22 veterans kill themselves every day, and there's not an outcry for that. The doctors, I've worked in healthcare for years, and doctors have the highest suicide rate of any civilian profession. There's no outcry for that. And then all of a sudden, we have a virus, and we're going absolutely ape crazy because, people who are vulnerable might die. And I'm like, my gosh, man, I just feel like sometimes where we focus sometimes just is not in the right spots.
And, that's what honestly pushed me to start telling my story. And that's what brought me back to the foster home that I grew up at. Because if you look at the statistics, like foster kids don't get bachelor's degrees predominantly, right? So it's like 3% that are estimated to get a bachelor's. Out of that 3%, maybe 1% get a master's. So I have both of those. Yeah. Also, along with that, before you even get to that statistic, hopefully the foster kid doesn't kill themselves. And like, this is just being blunt and honest, right?
Yeah, no, you're right.
So hopefully you make it to that point. So not only did I make it through that category, I did that. I then joined the military, which again is one of the top ranked for suicide and depression and anxiety and all these things, right? So I experienced all these things and overcame it. And like, that's not something that you should keep inside. And I think for all those people struggling with that and those people who overcome it, like that's something you got to do. I know it's hard. And for me, it was very hard at first to tell my story. Like I'm coming up on a year of the first time. So in July 1st was the first podcast that I ever went on and told my story.
Really?
2019. Yeah. Wow. So since then, I've told it a lot of different places to a lot of different people, spoke at events, things of that nature. Right. And, I'm glad I took that leap. And I hope for people listening, if you're on the fence about taking that leap, or you're like, nobody wants to hear it from me. Like they want to, and they do. And some people don't even know that they do.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. They do. There are lots of people. There's a lot of people in the world, and there's a good percentage of that want to hear your story, and they'll be inspired by it because someone might hear this or any of the other podcasts that you've been on or events that you've spoken at, and if one person hears your story and it gives them hope and brings them out of a rut and maybe saves their life, then you telling your story was impactful. And that's power. That's power. That's powerful.
Yep. I'm all about that. Ripples in the water, man. You don't even know. Like you help that one person out, and who knows? Maybe that person becomes, a great keynote speaker, or a doctor that saves lives, or a scientist who discovers the next whatever. So you have no clue where it goes or what it reaches. But I can tell you, I know exactly where it reaches if you don't do anything. It reaches nowhere.
It reaches nowhere. That's right. Yeah, that's a great attitude for sure.
Roman, what just to switch gears a little, not switching gears that much, I guess, but what about positive role models in your life? Like, so one question that's like really popping out in my head is like, who's responsible for like showing you and teaching you love? And not even just like love, like in a relationship, but like, I always talk about things like professional love that you might even have for like, coworkers, love for your fellow soldiers that you have. I think a lot of people take it for granted because they do grow up in homes where they had somebody teach them something as simple as love. How did you pick that up? And I guess what were those major moments in your life? I'll just let you take that question however you want.
Yeah. So I think there's two pieces to it. And the first answer sounds negative, but I don't mean it that way. I do the opposite of what was done to me, because early on, I wasn't shown love, right? I wasn't shown it in the way that I thought it was. Or I thought that that was love, and that's very unhealthy, right? So I kind of did the opposite. So I now have a son. So I say part of the reason I'm a good father is because I don't do the things that my dad did to me. And that sounds negative, but on the other side of it, people will say, I'm a good dad because my dad showed me how. So is it really necessarily wrong for me to say that? It may hurt and it may make some people feel bad, but that's kind of the truth of it. And that's okay. I'm fine with that. I have a son who's amazing. He's empathetic. He goes up to random kids who fall and says, "Are you okay?" And I know that's because me and my wife teach him to do that. And I know that nobody taught me to do that when I was little, right? So he's already ahead in the game of life. So that's part one of it. The second part is I joined the military, and there were a lot of great role models. Like I said, you get to watch a lot of great leaders. You get to watch fathers who leave their children to go on deployment, and mothers, and a lot of strong women and men. I just kind of watched them, and I learned from them afterwards. And even after transition, like once I hit that bottom, I then said, okay, I got to get away from the people who are drinking all the time, the people who are stuck in this, the best days of my life or when I was deployed. Like I got to get out of that mindset. And so I started finding people who were, Anthony Trucks, Marquez Ogden, like these people that I don't necessarily have like crazy relationships with, but I watch what they do, the Order of Man podcast. I started listening to the Good Dad Project. I started listening to all these different things, Craig Rochelle as a pastor. I started reading the Bible. I started getting religious again. And I just kind of went on that journey and started kind of finding it and saying, hey, I kind of like what this person does. Let me try it. Okay, well, I did that piece. I don't like that part. Let me kind of pull that out, right? And so I started kind of building me from scratch, but taking all these different components from people. I'd be like, ooh, I like that. I like that. Almost like Johnny Cash's one piece at a time, right? Like I'm now this weird Cadillac, but you know what? Like I'm me, and I took it from all these different people, and I found my identity inside of that. And so it's just a piece at a time. And there's still people I learn from. I listen to y'all's podcasts. I connect with y'all. Every interaction gives me another link. And for somebody who wasn't emotionally connected, now at this point, I just try to connect with everybody because I'm going to get something from everyone I connect with. And that something may be good, it may be bad. That's kind of the risk you run, and that's part of life. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. So I just take it all and kind of learn from it. But those were kind of the big influences when I first started on this journey. And then obviously my wife, she loved me through through the most horrible. And now having a sister who I recently connected with, just the love that a sibling has, even though we haven't been connected for years of our life, like we missed years together, but she's my biggest cheerleader, right beside my wife. So when my podcast airs every Wednesday, she's the first person like, hey, I listened, it was really good, right? And I'm like, it just aired. So it's
that's great.
That kind of stuff.
Isn't that a great feeling? Like someone listened to your podcast.
Yes.
I mean, Luke, would you agree? I mean, it doesn't even have to be
100%.
Like thousands of people. It's like, oh wow, someone I don't know listened to my podcast. That's cool.
Yeah, I the other day I was with my wife on the couch and a video topped 100 views, right? And to everyone that's probably like, 100 views, that's nothing, right? Like we're in the age of millions, right? And to me, I'm like, whoa, 100 people watch my video. Like I'm jumping up and down.
I agree with that completely. Ours come out on Thursday mornings, and one just with Zero Northover came out this morning, and I literally had an email. Like when I woke up, there was already an email that someone had commented on YouTube that they loved it,
Nice.
right? And I'm like, I'm not even out of bed yet, and we're already getting people commenting. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's a great feeling. There's nothing better than seeing those positive reviews, or even seeing like the amount of listeners go up, especially when you're trying to do something to help other people, right? Like it's not like we're trying to show a funny video of like, slipping on the ice in the morning or something, which is funny, but see why it gets a million views, but those smaller views are better. Roman, what can our listeners take away? So if you had to teach a listener how to, because obviously the stuff you're going through and those things, those emotions, they come back every single day. I feel like people listen to podcasts, they say, oh, well, this guy's past it. You know what? Nobody's past it. It comes back every single day. You've just learned how to deal with it. Mm-hmm. And I think that, so what do you do on a daily basis, or just not even daily, whenever you feel yourself slipping, what have you learned or taught yourself to do?
Yeah. So that's a deep answer, right? But the short condensed version is, I wake up with a purpose. I know what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to be a good husband. I'm trying to be a good father, and I'm trying to help as many people in the world as I can every day. And with that, I know that I can't help others until I first help myself. So I try to read, whether it's a long verse in the Bible or just open up the YouVersion app and read a verse out of the Bible every morning. I try to do that. I try to go outside, get some grounding. I'm gonna sound a little crazy here, right? So I do like essential oils and grounding and sunlight. And I believe in the power of data dumping. So I just clear my mind with open journaling, open-ended, and things of that nature, because if I'm not showing up my best into the experiences, then how am I going to give my best to that other person? And so that's what I try to do. And obviously my wife will tell me, she's like, hey, you're starting to get really aggressive. Maybe you need to hey, what's going on here? So I have people that keep me in check. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like if there was one thing I'd tell every person to do, while those other things are great and I love them and I encourage them highly, I think having that accountability, and everyone has their different version of how it is, right? Accountability partners, masterminds, whatever it is. I'm just saying, have people that you can text real shit to, and tell them, I feel angry today, or even just talk to, if it's your spouse or whoever, right? Just, I feel angry. I feel happy. I feel that, express those feelings, because for me, not doing that for so long, it's just so good when you can do that with somebody. And then that person will tell you, because you're doing that to them, they'll tell you theirs, and it's kind of reciprocation, right? But along with that, they also then start checking into your life and saying, hey man, you haven't told me anything for a while. What's going on? Hey, I haven't connected with you. What's happening? They start seeing it even before you do. And if you don't let people in your life, they're not going to hold you accountable, whether it's working out, being faithful, not watching porn, whatever, right? Insert any topic there. But if you don't give people that opportunity, they're not going to. And they're going to look at your Instagram life or your Facebook life and say, oh, he's got it all together. He's perfect. Like, I'm a foster kid. I'm always going to be a foster kid. There's still days that I have to deal with the fact that my son doesn't get to experience family the same way that every other person does, because I don't have parents for him to go talk to. I don't speak to them. That's not a thing for him. So he only has one set of grandparents, whereas some people have two. So stuff of that nature. So it's always there, and it's kind of like that fire, right? I got to keep an eye on it, and when I start to see it burning out of control, I got to pull some of that stuff out so it doesn't take over.
Yeah,
it's great. One thing you said that's huge is that the positive network to have around you of people that can, let you know when you're maybe not getting out of control, but you're slipping back to the old ways. My mother always used to tell me when I was younger, and it didn't make sense till I was older. She'd always say like, well, you are the people that you hang around with. Mm-hmm. Right. I always took this as a negative connotation. So whenever I was growing up, I was like, oh, well, if you hang around with a bunch of kids that are doing drugs, then basically that's going to be your reputation and you're going to do drugs, right? That's what people are going to think of you. It wasn't until when I got older, later on in my life, like probably even in my 30s, that it dawned on me that this is a lever you can pull for positivity as well. And by surrounding yourselves with those positive people, you actually become the type of people that you're surrounding yourself with in a positive way as well. And it just took me a while to get that. So it's really, I love hearing you say that. That's awesome advice to listeners to say, to create that network around them. And it's something that they can do instantly. If there's somebody they admire, there's tons of people in my life I admire now, and I make a point to be a better friend to them, or just to keep in touch. And it's worked out really well.
And that's the other piece of it too, right? So I call it swinging the bat, right? You can call it whatever you want. But you just take that jump and that risk, whether it's for a podcast, reaching out to guests or whatever, but you just swing, And so for me, I just, oh man, Anthony Trucks is never going to want to hear from me, but I won't know unless I reach out to him. The Bo and Luke show isn't going to want me to be on, but I listen to them all the time and they inspire my life, right? Like whoever that is, like for that person, don't be afraid to those people that you look on the outside or on the Instagram and say, oh, that's who I want to be. It's okay to reach out to them. Like obviously bring value to them and all those different things of that nature, but don't be afraid to say, oh, this person inspires me, but maybe they're out of my league. That's ideal. You want to be shooting to be connected with people who are out of your league. So, but when they get in your league, now you have another league to shoot up for, right? So it's kind of that's kind of my driver inside of that.
Yeah. I write something almost very close to those words in my book. I had very simple. And when you finally, even though whenever you learn it, you just do it, and you just figure out that sometimes the worst case scenario is only somebody saying no, which, hey, you're no worse off than you were before you asked, right? I did something very similar when I was reaching out to Mike Barger asking him to write the foreword of my book, and he was founder of JetBlue Airways, but he's a former Navy Top Gun pilot instructor. Yeah. And I just wrote it out. I mean, man, I was so nervous about reaching out to him and like, gosh, can I even ask this guy to do this? Right. And I'd met him at the University of Michigan prior to, and I just kind of spun it around in my head. I'm like, well, this can only come out, one of a few ways, right? He might just totally reject me, not respond. Okay, cool. That's a no. Right. He could respond and say no, so it's a no. He could respond and say, well, I'll think about it. So, well, okay, maybe. Or he could actually respond and say yes. There aren't too many options there, mm-hmm. Right? So you kind of roll that through your head and you're like, yep, I can ask. No big deal. It's no sweat. I'll ask.
True.
Go for it.
It's true.
Right?
I want to make a point. I'm going to go way deep here, guys. But I think that this is all right. So schools are getting better. Right. But there was a point in time where you were judged solely on your ability to memorize information.
Yeah.
Now they're evolving, and now they're grading kids on their ability to find that information, which is a much better way to learn, right? So we were brought up, everyone on this podcast right now was brought up, and without aging ourselves, was brought up in a time where you were penalized for making any mistakes. Now, when you get out into the real world, that is not the way life is. And for people listening to this podcast, I cannot stress it enough that making mistakes is human. It's part of the learning process, and it's what's ultimately going to make you better. Here's a perfect example is baseball. And I'm tying it back. I thought about this because of when you said just taking a swing. In baseball, if you fail 70% of the time at the plate, 70%, you're in the Hall of Fame. If you bat 300, if you get a hit
3 out of 10 times.
30% of the time,
Yeah.
3 out of 10 times, you're in the Hall of Fame. You are the best to walk the planet at a professional sport. And that's huge. And I think that people get these confused and they say, oh, well, I made a mistake. You know what? Life is all about mistakes. It's about learning from them. And that's just the perfect example of, taking that swing.
You got to. So Roman is all over that. And you were talking about Michael Jordan earlier. There are stats out about him. And one of the, he not only does he hold the record for he holds a lot of records, but one of the records that you just wouldn't think about, I think he has the records like for the most missed shots, right? But he also took more shots, right?
That's right.
So he swung the bat in baseball terms over and over and over and over, which makes him he's like the greatest basketball player of ever, all time.
That's right.
Right.
Cy Young, the title for the most wins in baseball history. He also holds the title for the most losses.
Yeah, see? And I think Babe Ruth, the home run king, is also the strikeout king.
That's right.
Yeah, so, that's perfect, Roman, because that just goes into kind of like the whole thing for our show is, even on our website, our tagline is let's get after it, right? You got to swing the bat.
And that's my phrase, right? So I went into foster care and all these different places, and it's a common theme. And it was actually in the very first podcast I was guest on. One of my mantras is your hustle has to be bigger than your struggle. So you can have hard times, you can have bad things happen to you, but if you choose to let that define you, that's it. That's game. Yep. You're done.
Yeah, you're done.
But if you say, hey, this happened, like me, I could say I had an affair on my wife. Nobody will ever trust me. Nobody will ever take me seriously. Nobody will ever think that I'm a good person because the only conception is once a cheater, always a cheater. Well, then I'm done. That's a game. There's no point, right? But I said, you know what? I don't agree with that. God can change all things. I can do all things. Let's get after it, right? And so I got after it, and it's work. And there's ups and there's downs and all of that, right? And then inside of life, so all of that. So for me, your hustle has to be bigger than your struggle is kind of my way of personifying that. But yeah, there's 1,000 different ways to say it. But you just can't quit. And this is coming from somebody who almost quit on life, right? And now I can kind of sit here and laugh about it because it was a weak decision. And that's not to say people who do that are weak. It's to say that there's more to it. And I didn't see the full picture. And I wasn't letting people help me. I wasn't doing all those things that I was just talking about. And look at the negative slope for it, right? When you eat bad food, what happens? You get lethargic, you get lazy, you can't lift, you can't do anything you need to do. When you eat good food and you're doing good things, all of a sudden you can start running marathons. You can start hitting the ball. You can start doing all those different things. But you got to put good fuel in. So you got to put that good fuel in your life. And that's what your hustle is. Your hustle is your fuel for when the struggles come up, because the bad times are going to come, right? Rocky, the Bible, take whatever analogy, it's going to happen. So you have to say, all right, what is my reason to get through this? Is it my family? Is it my passion? Is it whatever? And you got to hold tight to that. And you just got to swing and brave.
There you go. Well said. Yeah.
I'm talking about.
I'm pumped up. I'm ready to go. So Roman, before we let you go, we can't end without talking about Real Talk with Roman, your podcast. So give our listeners, because I think last time I looked, I think people who are like active podcast listeners. So even for our listeners, maybe have like 5 to 7 podcasts that they like and they tune into like on a regular basis. right? So tell us about Real Talk with Roman. What, real quick, what's your inspiration behind that? And what are you trying to do with your podcast, and where people can, where our listeners can find you?
Yeah, so you can find me at Real Talk with Roman, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter limits the characters, so it's at Real Talk with Rome, right? but yeah, and then YouTube, Real Talk with Roman, and it's really just an interview series to talk with people of different walks of life. I do business consulting and things of that nature, so it has no tie-in to my business or anything like that. It's just me having real conversations with people. And I do it in 10-minute intervals, right? Because I know we all got a lot going on, and you can really get a lot out of a conversation in 10 minutes. That's not to say that there is no place for long form like this, but I really enjoy doing those 10-minute conversations because it really condenses down to that heart. And there's such deep conversation. Like this week, we had a military spouse who was a previous military member, and she's a mother, and she's expecting a child. So for Mother's Day, we did a special Mother's Day episode talking about what it's like for her to be a mom. But as I listened to it, like, it's good information for a dad. It's good information for a person who's just stuck at home during COVID, right? Because it's real interaction for how to do that. And then I've had Marquez Ogden, Anthony Trucks, like all these different people from different places. And then just regular people, like a guy who was bullied and now owns an agriculture business, right? And there are all these different stories, and it's to show that we're all interconnected. You're really not that far away from, the person who you think is this crazy influencer that you could never be. Their story isn't really that much different from yours, and they have real actionable advice if you're willing to listen. And it's been such a fun little project for me to just connect with people and get deeper.
And they come out every Wednesday, you said. Is that correct?
Every Wednesday.
Or that's when they release?
Yep, every Wednesday with the interview, and Friday I do kind of a recap where I talk about the impact the episode had on me. Because by the time Friday rolls around, I'll probably have listened to it 20, 30 times in the editing room. And so I have a lot of thoughts on what it does to me. So I do a 10-minute recap of my thoughts on it.
Oh, that's cool. All right. So then we need everybody to make sure that they watch out for Roman's book, and we'll keep an eye on that too. Make sure you let us know when it publishes. We'll help you promote it, because I know that's a big challenge in and of itself.
I love it. Accountability.
That's right. Good stuff. Luke, any follow-up?
Roman, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on here, man. You're always welcome at the Bo and Luke Show, just learning your journey. Big hug to you, brother.
Man, virtual hugs. I could do this with y'all for like another 3 hours. This is super fun.
I feel the same way. The same way. So, glad you're here with us. Congrats on your successes as you're going through this big journey we all call life. I will say though, so one thing positive about your struggles is you're built for the coronavirus times, man. This is probably easy for you.
Yeah, me and my wife, we had to be connected in a room when we didn't even want to be in the same room with each other for a little bit. So this is perfect. We're doing puzzles and having fun, and our son is hunting dinosaurs in the yard. So
there you go.
It's actually been probably really healthy for everybody, right?
Exactly.
Awesome. Thanks, Roman. We always end our show with "That's a wrap." So take us out, man. Tell our listeners that's a wrap.
Oh man, that's a wrap.